All right. Let's see. Oh, perfect. I thought it muted me there for a second. How's it going, Jimmy Jr.? What's new? What's shaking?
It's great. Everything is great. Nothing's really that new, but it is a beautiful summer up here in the northeastern region of the United States. But yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me up here.
I love how, based on our backgrounds, even though you're in the eastern side and I'm in the central side, it's later where I am than where you are. Because that's how time zones work.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I'm stoked to have you here. I'm really excited to have you on the show. We did a show together. We did Talk Heathen. For anybody watching, you can find the link actually in the description box right now. And I thought it was just great to work with you. I thought we had a really good time. All the comments were talking about how they liked our co-host vibe as a duo. And so I thought you would just be a great guest to have on a live stream here. And you agreed, which is awesome, which is always helpful. But enough for me. Tell me about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? What are you all about?
Well, who am I? That is a question I don't think I have quite answered yet. I think I've struggled with that for a long time, but I will tell you a little about myself. So I would be remiss if I didn't first and foremost define myself as a father and a husband. I put the father first because I think if I had to choose between my wife and my children, my wife would be so pissed if I chose her and not the kids.
Yes,
so,
yes.
I'm
smart man.
Yeah, right. My first duties are as a father. The kids need me. My wife doesn't need me. She's smarter than me. So, but yeah, I've been married to my wonderful wife for 4 years, and due to COVID, we had the standard COVID wedding, so we got married by ourselves on the beach.
Yay!
In 2020, and then a year and a half later, when things kind of cleared up a little, or maybe it was 2 years, we did the reception, when everybody flew to meet us and stuff. So it was nice. But yeah, I'm a family man these days. Wasn't always that way. I have a long and checkered past. I guess you can say I was. I'm a military man. I was a construction worker some time ago. I was I've been a student. I've been a lot of things. I think I have a lot of experiences that kind of hopefully finally have come together to make a really good product. So I'm glad that you see the good in me enough to invite me on your show.
Or I see the equal bad. I'm like, this seems like a peer of mine. Another dark horse, is he?
Yeah.
So it's interesting, though, because everything you just listed is not, I would think, what most people would attribute to a really well-known internet atheist either. Like I feel like if people were to think, like, who is somebody who would be a well-known atheist in like the call-in show space, the internet space, because we're both involved in Talk Heathen, we're both involved, or I'm about to be involved with you in nonprofits. How did that happen? How did you go from like the traditional American man to also well-known internet degenerate?
Well, first, thank you for capturing the degenerate part.
Yes, very important.
I appreciate that. I don't know if I'm well known. I'm maybe slightly known. I don't know. In the internet corners of the world, I would say that some people know me, and I'm happy with that. Hopefully I'm helping them in some way. But, you've opened the floodgates, so I don't know how much time you got, but I'm just going to start at the beginning. Okay?
Do it.
And I think it's good that you have recognized, or it's kind of funny in a way that you've recognized that there is maybe a traditional type of approach to living life, maybe, and then one that's not so traditional. So in the traditional aspect, I was raised as a Lutheran. I was brought up in church, went to Sunday school. I was told I was a Christian. And there is I had some problems with that my whole life, my whole youth. And I'm happy to get into that a little bit later. But right now for the I think, timeline, I'll just skip over that for now. But I did struggle with my religion for a long time. And not only did I struggle with my religion, but I kind of struggled to find my path, to find my way. I was one of those people that I didn't go to college after high school. I struggled in high school. Kind of jumped into doing construction and tried to, figure out what it was I want to do. Then I went to, I went to like an art school, and then I went to like a computer graphics school. Then I said, I'll study liberal arts. And then I got my degree in history, and it was
it is. Liberal arts. That's how you an atheist. I should have known.
So that's right, because you know what? I pushed myself to go to college. I was never a good student, and I was always intimidated by taking on a college education. And so I tried to find ways around it,
Interesting.
like doing like not, and I'm not trying to say that vocational training or some kind of technical training is not beneficial, because it certainly is.
It's very beneficial.
But
Yeah.
I tried to focus on one thing, right?
Right.
Instead of going into something that was going into like an educational background that was just going to fire hose me with a bunch of information from things that I really wasn't interested in. And that was actually the thing I decided, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm just going to go study philosophy, sociology. I'm going to study science, and and I landed on history, and I said, all right, I'm getting my degree in history. So,
That's awesome.
yeah, thank you. That was the thing that took me away from my religion. Now, I went to college.
Interesting.
I went to college at a predominantly religious, a Catholic school. I didn't grow up Catholic, and I had no connection to Catholicism. But at the same time, I was still of the mindset that even though I struggled with my religion, I had like this connection to the afterlife.
Right.
That God didn't really care what you worshipped as long as you believed. Things
Yeah.
like that. And so I really went to the school because of the campus. I said, this is great. Heart of New York City, great little campus, a lot of fun, vibrant nightlife. I'm going to do it.
Starbucks, bagels. What
Right.
more can you want?
Right. The deli, the pizza. I mean, I got it all. Right. And ironically, the school made everybody have a minor in religious studies. And
Really?
that was a requirement. And I ended up learning about Hinduism, Shintoism, what's it called? Mormonism. And I'm like, Scientology. And I'm like, what is going on out there in the world? What is existing in people's minds out there? And, it kind of just opened my eyes. And the more classes, the more coursework I took, I was like enlightened, if you will. And so I really was hanging on by a thread. I mean, my atheism, I just needed to be pushed. I just needed a little nudge. Okay. Then,
Was there, if you don't mind me asking,
yeah,
was there, as you were learning about all the different religions, did any of them speak to you like, oh, this might be the one for me, or that might be the one for me? Or were
yeah.
they all just kind of like, whoa, this is a lot. These are all a little bananas.
No, I liked Taoism.
Yeah.
And I can't really recite, like, I didn't learn too in depth about it, but I remember the basic principles, and I remember understanding the life for not understanding, but being educated on the life force that travels through all things. And I felt very confident in that presence in my life, and to living things, at least having a connection to each other.
Yeah.
Now, the thing about that is you could describe that to be whatever you want. I mean,
Right.
that could just be compassion,
Right. Right.
and I have compassion. So
Yeah.
I realized I already have a word for that thing. And so Taoism isn't, all it is just some other ideology.
Right.
And after a while, I realized I don't necessarily need an ideology, like not one that's religious in its roots anyway. So some time went by. I got my degree in history. About a year went by after I graduated college. I really could not find my way. It was a tough economy out there. I was having trouble still. My underlying problems of setting a path for myself and figuring out what I was going to do with the rest of my life was really difficult. So I decided I'm going to join the military. And I am going to, instead of constantly allowing myself to derail, I'll pick plan A, and then halfway through plan A, I'm like, plan B, plan C.
Although I will say, if derailing still gives you a degree in history, you're doing pretty good.
Well, yeah,
Not bad.
yeah, okay, all right. So, but I think that what I was finding was that I was not able to take my successes and turn them into more success. Right?
That makes sense.
It was very frustrating. So I said, I think I just need a little structure. And I don't know that I have that right now. I was in a relationship with a girl who that just went south. My living situation was not good. I wasn't making good decisions. And so I decided I'm going to give myself over to somebody who could maybe make something out of me. But in that meantime, between college and joining the military, about a year and a half went by. I did some things, I worked in my plan originally was to go to law school, and I decided I can't stick around here anymore and mount up like any more loans.
Right.
I can't go to any more school right now. Like, I just need an adventure. I need to get out of here. I need to do something different, like just something
Yes.
crazy. Let me
Yes.
do something crazy. And I did.
Yes.
And so I took off, and I've been in the Air Force now for 14 years. I think what I want to do is, real quick, since I mentioned the Air Force, just say that my thoughts and opinions are my own, right? I don't
Right.
represent none of my
Right.
things. Nothing you hear me say represents any Department of Defense entity, any branch of the
Right.
military service. So let me just get that out of the way. But I've had a really great career. I've been around all over I got out of my comfort zone. I grew up in New York, never left. I moved to North Carolina, met people from all over the place, right? Then I moved to Texas, met my wife there, lived in Florida. I've been I don't even know how many countries I've been to, but I've spent time all over the world. And I really have just taken in a lot of what's happening around me and realized, like, man, if there has ever been a nuanced species on this planet, it is human beings, is it not?
Yes. Yes.
And so there really just isn't one way to be correct. And now, or there is not one correct way, I should say. And now, piecing that all together with my education, with the things I learned studying history, the awful atrocities, mass murder,
Yeah.
genocide, things that
Yep.
are supported by religion
Yes.
and are championed. These things are championed by religion and by religious texts and by all different religions. So
Yes.
obviously, this isn't necessarily a religious thing. It's a human thing, and when you can weaponize religion and use that as a way to turn against other people, it just becomes very dangerous. And
Yes.
when you codify it into law, into education, that becomes even more dangerous because that
Yep.
affects people against their will. And so, in the meantime, so I've been doing now I'm doing the Air Force, I'm traveling and doing stuff. I went and got my master's degree in international relations.
Hey, that's
And
cool.
yeah.
That's really
So
cool.
I just decided after a long break of education, I was going to go back. I learned a whole lot more, learned more about the world, learned more about international politics and things like that. And I think, I think that my journey just kept going further away from my traditional roots. So that's the long way to answer your question. How did I go from these traditional roots? And following in the footsteps of my predecessors, my parents, my grandparents, you went to school, you got married, you got a job, you raised a family. And that's the path I was on. And, I was like, I don't know. This isn't for me. This just isn't for
Yeah.
me. I don't
Yeah.
think I can do this, for another generation. I don't think I can be the fourth or fifth generation in a row that just stays in New York and raises a family and gets a job for 30 years. Now, don't get me wrong. I come from a great family and I love my
Right.
parents and I love
Right.
everybody. I have no beef with their
Yeah.
lifestyle or what they have been able to provide for me. It's just that once I realized that the world was such a big place and that I had it at my disposal, that I needed to go learn about it and travel it and explore it. And
Oh,
so,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, I love my family, and I have never felt like my brain was more different than them ever before than I do now. Like,
yeah,
I feel
yeah,
more different. They love me, but, like, we are not the same. And there's
right,
nothing wrong with the path they chose, but I could not choose that same path.
right. And I may be doing something similar now, but I have the insight that I would not have had I decided, you know what, I'm
Right.
just going to college. You know what, I'm just joining the
Right.
military. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's like anything else. People can tell you, it's like any kind of fitness regimen. It's like quitting smoking. It's like quitting drinking. It's like going to law school. People can tell you your entire life that you need to do something. But
yeah.
until you're ready to do it or until you're interested in doing it, there's really no point in starting because it's not going to be what you feel like you're meant to be doing for a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that was kind of what was kind of happening. The some of the advice that I had gotten over the years, I don't think was great, and I'm not talking about my parents at this point. But I just never really surrounded myself with people that were beneficial for me.
Yeah.
So and I shouldn't say never. I've got some people in my life that have been there since the beginning, and I'm incredibly grateful.
Yeah.
In my travels, though, joining the military, leaving, and researching, religious things, questioning my own religion, I found the ACA. This is about 2010.
Yeah,
Um,
buddy. Back in the
and
day.
Oh yeah, the old guard really set me up for success. The greats, Matt Dillahunty, of course. I can't. You can't speak about atheism nowadays without talking about Matt Dillahunty, right? Um, yeah, and so he and Tracy Harris was great. Jen Peebles was great, even though she's got me blocked on X right now. I don't know why. I don't know what I did. But Jen, if you ever see this, unblock me. You know, I
It's
want to.
because you're a degenerate. That's
Yeah,
why.
I know, I know. But she was a military member, and so incredibly influential to me. Um, and so, I found the ACA. I became a fan. I watched them for a long time. I think I kind of tapered off a little bit, and then a few years ago, really started becoming more cognizant of what they were doing. And it just so happened that I feel like Matt Dillahunty. Well, he made an announcement that he was leaving, and I feel like there was an opportunity maybe that the ACA would try and rebuild.
Yeah.
I became interested. I listened for a couple months now. At this point, they were like, "We're looking for new hosts," and I'm like, "Nah, I don't know." And then finally, I just sent an email, and they got back to me. And,
Yes.
within 4 or 5 months, I was doing my first show, the nonprofits. I went on Truth Wanted. I went on Talk Heathen. They said, "Hey, we'd like to have you back for Talk Heathen," and I've been with Talk Heathen ever since. It's about a year now.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was gonna say, because like I've been watching ACA content for many, many years, probably like 10, 11 years at this point, and I feel like you just came out of nowhere and then you were everywhere.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
everywhere. Everywhere I looked, you were just there. And like you're it's really funny because whenever I would see you on streams and stuff, I'd be like, "Man, like this person is like dynamic. They've really got their shit together. Like they
huh.
know things." But also even when you're talking about things that you're saying you don't know, you say it with such confidence that I look back and I'm like, how much of that was just your voice? Like how much of the inspiration was just your really confident voice that I'm like, yeah, I'm behind what Jimmy Jr. says.
Well,
Um,
I really appreciate that.
yeah.
They took a gamble on me, but I've also been the squeaky wheel and asking for more exposure, not because like I want to be out front per se, but I want to get better.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
know that that's not going to come without practice. And so the longer
Yes.
I wait between shows, the more I'll have to cover. And I make mistakes a lot,
Oh
but
yeah.
I am so open. I hope I'm not the mistake guy, but I'm like regularly like, hey, I made a mistake. I need to address this mistake I made.
I mean, I wasn't going to tell you, but they do call you Jimmy the Mistake Guy Jr. on the streets. I wasn't
I
going to say
knew
it,
it.
but you asked.
I knew it. I knew it. But I really appreciate that. I had a great time working with you last weekend when
That
we
was
did our
fun.
show. Yeah, and I was looking forward to working with you. I've been watching you for a while now, since you started doing ACA products, and yeah, I'm super excited that we got to work together. That we're working
Yeah.
together now. Next week is going to be so much fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I'll say it
So
again. We're going to be on the nonprofits next week, which
yeah.
is going to be fun. Because I didn't know if I was allowed to say that. So now that I know I'm allowed to say that, I'm just
Oh
going to
yeah,
keep saying it.
yeah.
Um, so I really like what you said about getting better because that is so important. One of my favorite things to do, speaking of which, if you're watching in the comment section, one of the first links is a thoughts and opinions form. Please fill it out. But one of my favorite things to do is ask people their thoughts, their opinions. What do you think? What do you enjoy? What do you want to see more of? What do you want to see less of? And you would think, because I did stand up for 16 years.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
when you do comedy, and you ask people, what do you want? They say, we want you to shut the fuck up. Like, that's all they say. Like, just
Yeah.
mean stuff. You never want to ask people their thoughts. But when you get involved in like these live call-in shows and these live streams, and you ask your audience, what would you like to see more, especially in this space? I have never had more supportive, more engaged, more excited, more invested people than I've experienced since joining this like atheist agnostic creator space.
Mm-hmm.
And to date, I am still always just shocked at like the love people give you and like the really constructive feedback people give you when you ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I can't relate more to what you were talking about where you're like, I just want to get better. And how do you get better? You do it more. Like
Yeah.
you keep doing it.
And we have after shows with the fans too, and I always ask for feedback. I'm like, hey, what
Yes.
did you like about this show? What did you not like? What do you think I can do better? Some people are honest, and and they'll give me constructive criticism, and I take it. And I really appreciate that. I really do. So
Yeah, they just tell me I look like a vampire and then they move
yeah,
on.
well,
That's
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you've been getting beat up a little bit, but it's an
I like it.
initiation. It's initiation,
Yeah.
it's a rite of passage.
No, I
Yeah.
like it because it is not even a quarter of what I used to get just posting comedy on the internet. So, like, people, they apologize to me all the time. They're like, "Sorry about what people said." I'm like, "They just
Yeah.
called me a vampire. That wasn't nothing. Like, that was
Well,
nothing."
I was Mr. Clean for a little while, if it makes you feel any better. So,
That's actually really funny.
yeah, yeah. I don't
Um,
wear white t-shirts on podcasts anymore just because I don't want to hear it anymore.
that's
So,
really fun. And so from like a personal perspective, is there anything that you've learned about yourself from doing these shows and from answering people's questions when they call in and doing live streams? Has anything surprised you about yourself, or have you learned or grown personally in
yeah,
that way?
absolutely. That's a great question. So, that confidence that you talk about, I have developed some confidence over the years. I did public speaking for a long time. I was a military intelligence officer, so I spoke in front of people all the time. I
Mm,
had big maps and diagrams, and I'm explaining the world away to everybody. And so I did become very confident, but that can actually be negative because you can trick yourself with your own
yes.
confidence. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And
Yes.
you fail to recognize some of your own pitfalls. And so,
Yes.
how we have in religious discussions, religious arguments, you have the God of excuse me, the God of the gaps fallacy, right? And
Right.
it's basically when people don't know the answer to something, so they fill in that knowledge gap with God. Well, you could actually do the same thing and not even realize it. Like, for example, I have a really I have a pretty good knowledge of history stemming back to, I don't know, 3000 BC, Egypt, ancient Mediterranean, up until now. And then I have some knowledge of prehistory, before the agricultural revolution. But those years in between, I don't really know. And I found myself a couple of times talking about it like I knew it. And I was making links and connections with people who wanted to argue history. And I'm like, holy crap, wait a minute, I don't even think that's right. And I was corrected. I was corrected by other hosts, and I was corrected by people in the comments, and I have to go back and look at it. I'm like, you know maybe I need to stop a little bit more and think about what words are going to come out of my mouth and not ride this confidence into a wave of just destruction. You know what I mean?
Yes,
uh
yes. The number of times in a week where I have to clarify to people, I don't know what I'm talking about. I just sound confident. I could be
yeah,
making this shit up. I don't know. So please Google it and make sure that I'm correct about this.
yeah, yeah. So I think I do have an ability to now. I think I've gotten a better ability to kind of stop and think about what the next words are going to be, because the other thing that makes it difficult being on a live call-in show is that, especially being somewhat new to it now, not so much, but 6 months ago, yeah, I was still kind of getting comfortable, and I'm racing the clock. So I want to talk fast to get my points out and let the other person talk, and then get to the next caller, and then make sure I get all the calls in before the show ends in an hour and a half. And it's like managing that mentally and still trying to have a conversation is very difficult.
Yes.
So, you know, that was a hurdle I had to overcome. And in overcoming that hurdle, I just made I had some verbal mistakes I think I needed to clean up. So yeah.
Yes. And also, I feel like it gets to a point where you can live edit yourself. For example, during our episode, at one point I mentioned I mentioned someone's theory. And the
Right.
minute I said it, I was like, they're gonna eat me alive by saying I should have said hypothesis instead of theory. I already know it, but there's like not enough time to address it. And sure enough, in the comments, it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that's not a theory. The theory, and I'm like, hey guys, I know. I am but a woman. I am a
Yeah.
simple woman on earth. But it's also really helpful because I've been in professional debate for years, for over a decade now, and that stuff it's similar in that way too, where they're like, "No, you said this." "Yeah, but I meant but you said,"
Yeah, I
and so
know.
it makes you a lot more cautious of your words, and I think it's helpful. I think it's really helpful. Um, what has been the hardest look you've had to take at yourself? since getting involved in like live shows and live call-in shows and atheism, has there ever been something somebody pointed out where you're like, damn, they're not wrong, but what am I going to do with that information?
I mean, yeah, so a few people have called me angry. And I'm aware I've got the,
He's just from New York, guys.
yeah, right. Well, I wish more people understood that.
He's just from New York.
But there have been times where I've like taken pride in being level-headed and having the ability to have a tough conversation and remain impartial and very fact-based. But then I look at myself and I clearly got emotional, right? And
Yeah.
I clearly allowed myself to be worked up and maybe sound even nonsensical because I wasn't censoring myself real time. And so, yeah, having to look at myself and realize that the perception that I'm putting out is not what I'm feeling when I'm behind the wheel. It's different.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I remember one of the best constructive notes I ever got from the comments of a Talk Heathen episode was after it was like the next day, somebody pointed out that whenever I would go into an idea or a thought, I would say, if that makes sense, if that makes sense, if that makes sense. And the comment was, girl, it makes sense. Like, stop
Wow.
checking
Yeah.
with the world. And I like just that one sentence, just like, girl, it makes sense. You don't have to keep asking if it makes sense. It makes sense. I was like, oh. And then I realized how often I end sentences with, if that makes sense. Girl, it makes sense. You know what you're talking about. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, we all have these kind of verbal hangups that we rely
Yeah.
on. And some of it is like it's uncomfortable to be quiet. Like
Yes.
it's a little bit uncomfortable. And my students and when I was an intelligence officer training people to be able to give briefings in front of audiences, I used to tell them, when you're on stage or when you're in front of a class or a crowd and you have 2 seconds of silence, it feels like 30 seconds. And you're worried at the same time that you look stupid or you don't know what you're doing. And then I would say, but this is what 2 seconds looks like. And then you start talking again. And it's not that bad. Honestly, it's not bad at all. And if that's what it takes for you to realign yourself and get back on track, then do it,
Yeah. Yeah. And also silence can be very powerful. If I ask somebody a question and they don't seem the least bit nervous, they just seem like they're taking their time to think about it. To me, that's actually a little intimidating.
Yeah, right. And one thing that was really powerful, so I did a show with Richard Gilliver on Talk Heathen, I think back in like October or November, and we spoke to a guy who was silent at our responses. And Richard's remark was, your silence is very telling that we are having an impact on the way that you're seeing this, and you can tell he was contemplating not only our position, but even his own position. And it was just very powerful to hear him not talk was almost more revealing than if he was able to or if he tried to continue to support his own argument. Which he wasn't really doing effectively.
Absolutely. I feel bad. I agree so hard with everything you're saying. I feel like that Jack Nicholson gif where he's like, yes. Yeah. Sorry if I'm scaring anybody in the audience. Now, since you've basically put yourself on this platform, on this very public platform, in multiple ways as an atheist and as a non-religious person, how has that impacted your personal life, if at all?
Yeah, so unfortunately, and I don't have the heart to double check, but recently I think I lost a really good friend because of my religious views. So, the thing is, he was in my wedding party. I mean, I've known him for a long time. I know that he has gotten more religious and more conservative and more aligned with this conservative movement that's happening in our country. And it's not even necessarily the conservative movement. It's the wacky part of the conservative movement, right? Yeah. I can have a conversation about conservative ideals. I can't get with the nonsensical stuff. And so I'll make that distinction there. But I had a mutual friend of ours reached out to me recently and said, hey man, have you talked to so-and-so? And I said, well, actually, now that you mention it, I sent him a message a few weeks ago and I never heard back, which is not like him. And they're expecting, and I was calling to kind of do a life check, and I haven't heard back. And he said, yeah, he and I had a major blowout
Whoa.
over religious comments that I made. And well, the mutual friend did say some things that we in the atheist community frown upon, which was that people who are religious have a mental health issue, which is a no-no, because that's not true.
Right. Right.
It's big time not true.
Right.
And there are reasons why people are religious, and you can slice that a million different ways because not everybody's the same. But
Right. Right.
I do think that person for now has remained silent, and I have not gone back to see if he's my Facebook friend still. I have not checked in because I want to leave it open, right?
Right. Right.
He can fade away for a little while, and maybe in a year or two he'll come back and say, hey, I was just going through some stuff. I had some stuff in my mind. I hope you're doing well. And maybe I'll get that message someday. But if I keep attacking this, I could make the, deepen the wound, and I don't want to do that.
Right.
But I think that that kind of thing has been common. The more outspoken I am about my atheism, the more I'm looked down upon by people who are religious, and not always, but I think that to some extent, that's pretty common.
Or they feel sorry for you. Like
Yeah,
the people who have
yeah,
watched you grow up are always like, "Oh, it's such a shame to see where Jimmy's gone. It's
yeah,
such a shame to see what Sydney's about these days. I really had hope for her."
yeah. And I do feel bad, like I do and I don't, because I know that some of my family members, maybe my parents, are enmeshed in their life the way it is now, and the way it has always been, essentially, where there's this connection to the afterlife and to God and stuff like that. And I know, that there's gotta be some of their peers, whether it's other family members of mine or their friends, that maybe don't say anything to them, but in silent or behind closed doors are like, man, what is Jimmy's deal? You know, my father did tell me that, somebody said, hey, what's going on with your son? He's doing these atheist shows. And my dad did say that his response is, yeah, he's not a believer and he feels like he's doing what he needs to do. And I actually am really happy about that
That's
response
cool.
from
That's
my
really
dad,
cool.
who grew up Catholic. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily support, but it's support in a way. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
It's not admonishment either. It's not
right.
shame.
Right. I think it's just like my dad's friendly way of saying, just leave my son out of this. I feel like that I got a hint of that when he was explaining it. And so I was very proud. I was very proud of that moment. But that was actually pretty recent. So all in all, people get to know me and they don't know that I'm an atheist. And then when they find out that I'm an atheist, they drift away from me.
Which is so interesting.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I was a kid and I was religious, my mom used to say, be kind to people, treat people nicely, be their friend, be there for them when nobody else is, and then let them find out you're a Christian. And if they're interested in coming to church after that, let them come. Because we would talk about, should I just invite everyone to church? And it's like, well, maybe let them get to know you and then let them find out you're a Christian and be like, well, she's so nice and she's a Christian. And I treat atheism the same way.
Yeah.
I'm all it is my whole brand on YouTube, but on Facebook, it's not really my whole brand. On, when I'm out in public, it's not the first thing I bring up to people because I think about that. I'm like, let them get to know me, let them see that I'm nice, I'm friendly, I can have a laugh, I can take a joke, and then find out I'm an atheist. And maybe then they'll be like, if she can have fun being an atheist, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it's not so scary. Maybe I can explore these questions I've had that I haven't told anybody about.
Right.
But it's a bummer that also sometimes that means they just stop talking to you.
Well, I think that's a great tactic, because showing people the opposite of what they expect of you is a very powerful and enlightening position to be in. And it's a good thing for the other person,
Right.
For somebody to be raised with this idea, like, for example, all Muslims are bad people, right? And I know that happens in different corners of our society, especially among Christians. Or, in my own case, all atheists are evil. Atheists worship the devil. For somebody to find out that is absolutely not true, that has got to make them question, at least to a minor degree, what they've been told their whole lives. And that is a very important seed to sow, right? And so I did go through the angry atheist phase.
As we all do. Yep.
Yeah. Oh man, when I realized I was an atheist, when I realized that that label had fallen upon me, and I decided that my life could be different, that I might be different had I not been emerged into this lie, I got very angry with the world and I
Oh
lashed
yeah.
out, especially over social media, but even
Oh
to
yeah.
people who proselytize to me, I just was incredibly harsh.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's such an important thing to say, especially from somebody like you who, like we mentioned earlier, you come across as like very confident, very self-assured. I think it will bring people a lot of comfort to know that even someone like you goes through that phase where you're like, I literally feel like I can't control myself. I need to lash out. I don't know what to do with these feelings and emotions. Because that is so common. I went through the angry atheist phase. I don't know anybody who was raised religious. I know people who've never been religious, so they're not like angry at all when it comes to being an atheist, but people who I know that grew up in the church and grew up religious and became an atheist, we've all gone through that period where we're like, you were all making fun of me. You were lying to me. You were like, I feel like I've been duped. And it's so easy to get caught up in that and to make that your brand, to be that angry atheist on
Right.
people's Facebook
Right.
or MySpace or whatever. Um, and that's okay. It's not wrong of you to have those feelings, but at the same time, maybe there's a way that you can explore those feelings, or hopefully now, especially in 2024, you can instead find a platform on YouTube or Discord where instead of feeling like you have to lash out to people that maybe later you might regret lashing out to, whether it's loved ones on Facebook, you can go onto Discord or onto YouTube in the comment section and be like, I'm so angry and I don't even know what to do with these feelings. And have a bunch of people be like, hey, I'm a little bit past that phase. If you don't mind me, giving my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And we get a lot of calls like that from people
Yeah,
who are coming to terms with their atheism and they just don't know how to react or how to behave. And it's a fine line to walk because you don't want to give people advice where it can be perceived as counseling, but talking about
right.
our own experiences uh, can have an influence on somebody and hopefully can be helpful. What works for one of us though doesn't work for everybody, and so there's no
Right.
formula to deal with the world.
Right, right.
Um,
And there's no timeline for when you should stop being angry,
mhm, mhm.
That is, for some people it's 6 months, for some people it's 6 years, for some people it's a day. And so you shouldn't also feel bad about how long it's taking you to quote unquote get over it. If anything, however long you were religious, at least that long being mad about it is okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I am, incredibly lucky though that I do have people who love me and don't judge me no matter what. I have some friends that I know are still religious and they have dealt with my tirades and they have dealt with what seems to be kind of an unhinged moment or moments throughout my life and they still love me anyway. And so I don't have a big circle, but I've got a very tight one. And, I'm so grateful to the people that are there, my own family, my siblings, my parents. I have my best friends that, you know, I just, they love me for who I am. And, they understand who I am. And that is just such a great feeling. And
It
so
is.
I wish I could have that with more people. Unfortunately, that just isn't the way it is. And
Yeah.
I have my reason. I have my hypotheses on why that might be, but
Yeah.
it kind of just
Not
all
your
comes.
theories, your
Right, right,
hypotheses.
right,
Important distinction.
right.
Um so one thing I'll say in response to what you just said, and then I'll ask you a question, is I do wish that there were as many religious people who were okay with me being atheist as there are um religious people that I'm okay with being religious. Like there's a
Mhm,
lot of
mhm.
people in my everyday life. I'm in Tennessee. Everywhere I go, people at least claim to be religious. Whether or not that's true is, to
Sure.
be debated. Um but I just wish that I got the same treatment all the time, consistently, from other people saying, she might be an atheist. That's okay. I'm not an atheist and I believe I'm going to heaven, but we'll still be her friend. But it doesn't seem quite as balanced, which is sad. But
So,
maybe one day.
I mean, I have to talk about this. I have to
Yeah,
talk about this.
let's do
So,
it.
yeah, I think that religion is not as religious as people make it out to be, right? It's culture. It's
Yes.
culture. People
Yes.
people conflate the two, and it can be taken very personally because when it comes to their culture, it becomes an identity. And when you say, I don't identify with that religion, what it can be construed as is, well, you reject who I am. And that's not what it
That's
is.
not.
And
Nope.
I think that that's why there's so much tension in families when people kind of wander out on their own, away from the culture that they were brought up in, and they start to adopt other cultural aspects. It's not a rejection of where you come from, but it's an acceptance of the larger human experience, right? And it doesn't mean that you're insulting anybody by not
No.
being like them, but you have to admit that you're not like them. And for the and I'm talking worst case scenarios here, and this is what kind of has spawned my activism. I talked about some of the things I've learned about religious movements. You know, for the potential worst case scenario to be being burned alive when religion is codified, you have to speak up against that. We have
Yeah.
to manage that. And
Yes.
I'm okay with you being religious. What I'm not okay with is a religious mass getting control of the government. I have no
Yes.
idea what to expect, but I know what we've done before. And
Right.
that is something that we have to avoid. And
Right.
so I will continue to speak out about that, whether it makes people uncomfortable or not, whether they feel like it's an attack on their religion or their culture or their identity. It really is, it doesn't matter.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
And if me saying I deserve to make decisions for my own body and my own healthcare attacks you as a person, you need to reconsider what your beliefs and ideals are. If
absolutely.
me saying I deserve to make medical decisions and I deserve to not go to jail because my miscarriage could have been an abortion, um, if you feel attacked by that, you should really look into what it is that you think you believe in or that you're told is the correct belief to have. Um, and, I've never once woken up and thought, I don't like black licorice. I'm going to write to my legislators and make sure that nobody else gets to have black
Right.
licorice because
Yeah,
I don't like it. I think it's gross. I don't want to see it or smell it. That doesn't happen. There are lots of things that I vehemently don't like. So I don't buy them. I don't watch them. I don't involve myself with people who are engaged in these activities. And so again, if me saying I don't want to live the same way that you live makes you feel personally attacked, I think that says more about what you're told you're supposed to believe and how you're supposed to act than it does about me not wanting any part of it. And only not wanting any part of it, not trying to pass legislation against it, not trying to attack you on social media and like tag you and stuff and tell you to explain yourself, not arguing with you and like if my existence offends you because you know that I disagree with you, I think you should really consider whether or not that's an identity you want to be involved in.
absolutely. And you know what the problem with that is? The problem with that identity is that most of these people, and like you say, being in Tennessee, when they claim to be religious, most of these people can't really differentiate between a claim and a reality, right? So, how religious are you? Do you I have to censor myself here. I have to kind of take a step back because what really overwhelms me is the amount of people who have never read the Bible and
That's
claim to
right.
be Christian. It
Yes.
is absolutely asinine to say that you are a Christian and to say that you have dedicated your life to this fantasy and you have not even looked into it. And you've probably had the book in your house your entire life.
Yep.
And this is your God. I mean, this is
Yep.
your holy book. And I've said this so many times. This is your holy book. You have to know this thing, right? You probably know more about the regulations that govern your job than you do about this holy book that is the single-handedly most important work of human literature that's ever taken place in your mind, right? In the
Yes.
religious person's mind. But that's not what's happening.
No.
Instead, I'm getting back to this point of people saying, well, I'm a Christian, but that's just because we're all Christian, right? I mean, that's just what we do. We're Christian. We go to church. We do what they say. Bill Burr, the comedian Bill Burr, has a wonderful quip when he imitates a church and children going to church. He goes, say what we say when we say it again, and you can go home to your toys. And then the kid goes, okay, I'll say it again. Now can I go home to my toys?
Yes. Yes. I remember that. I remember being that kid that was like, if I say this thing about Jesus, all the grown-ups will be really proud of me. So I'm going to say this, and then I say it, and they're like,
so
yes.
In my church, Sunday school was in the basement, and it was a privilege to come up and join the adults upstairs. And I remember being in church upstairs. I must have been in 3rd or 4th, maybe 5th grade. I don't know. But our pastor was, kind of reprimanding the congregation about them watching Seinfeld. And yeah, I know, talking about how bad Seinfeld is, and don't get me wrong. I mean, look, Seinfeld's a great show. And it was hilarious, but some of the storylines, they have competitions about who can go longest without masturbating. They've got questionable
things.
You
think you would love that one.
Yeah, right. But I remember the pastor really denigrating the congregation. Like, you should not watch Seinfeld. And guess what happened? My parents still watch Seinfeld for like 7 more years until it ended. Right. And I'm like, they don't believe this shit, and that just made me realize, like, you know what? We go to church every Sunday, but after that, there's nothing. We don't talk about Christianity. We don't talk about the Bible. We don't read the Bible. We don't talk about it. I mean, we just go there because that's just what we're expected to do. I don't have to do this anymore. And man, I was a difficult kid. You and I talked about it, by the way, and I'm glad that you and I have a tie record for the number of times getting thrown out of Sunday school.
Yes.
So, that's cool that we share that. Not only do we share the junior designator, but we're evacuees or
Well, I didn't want to say anything before, but I did legally change my name to Jimmy Jr. So we also share that as well.
This is meant to be. This is God. I mean, I've got my proof. No,
this is all. And it's interesting that you say that, because my next question was going to be, like, you mentioned as a kid, you very early on had a problem with kind of being told what you believe and what you were. What was that kind of what you were talking about? Like that example of like not watching Seinfeld, but what were some other examples?
So again, being up in church, hearing this story, I don't remember which gospel it's from. I think it's probably from a couple, but there was this crowd or this group of possessed people, and Jesus came along and took their possessed souls and I guess took the demons out of them, put the demons into a group of pigs, and then it was run the pigs off a cliff into the ocean. I think that's the way the story went.
Yeah, they ran. I believe it was off a cliff into an ocean, or off a cliff, something like that. Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, why did he kill the pigs?
Right.
Like, why did he have to do that? This doesn't make any sense. This is such garbage. And that was the first thing that I can remember now. As a 40-year-old some odd man, I must have been 7 or 8 when that happened. That was the first thing that I can think of where my questioning of my religion started.
Yeah, it's like you can't just put them in a jar and like lock up that jar and throw the jar off a cliff. Like,
it's just a snowball. It's like, all right, so wait a minute. So, all right, Jesus is God. God is the most powerful person in the world, in the universe, etc. ever. Created everything. Had to kill a group of pigs, but killing things is wrong. And he didn't have the power to kind of just outright defeat the demons. Wait a minute.
Right.
Why doesn't he just defeat Satan? Like it just went from there, man. And like, I would be kind of, put in my place with stories and quips and anecdotes and say, okay, yeah, but that seed it never stopped growing, And so I finally got to a point in my life where I had I think freedom and the confidence and the education.
Education is such a big one.
Yeah. Not only question it, but back it up with actual facts. And that was the unraveling. of that.
Yeah, I don't think the educational aspect is talked about enough. And this is usually the part of the conversation where people come in and they're like, there are Christian scholars all over the place. Some of the most intelligent people I know are Christians. I'm not saying Christians are dumb or unintelligent or anything like that, but you can't tell me, you cannot tell me that there is not a very visible, if you're looking for it, if you allow yourself to see it, there's a very visible link between the areas of this country that are the most conservative religious and the least educated.
That's right.
And let me clarify by saying they are not Christian because they are uneducated. They are easily persuaded because they are uneducated. So it's not just Christianity. I bet they also have title loans. I bet they also have other things that they've been convinced to be a part of, MLMs. How many friends do we have from high school who maybe dropped out or didn't really do anything after school and they joined MLMs because they limited their education, therefore they limited their exposure, therefore they become susceptible to ideas. So I'm not saying, oh, Christians are dumb and they're uneducated and that's why they're Christians. No, it is the ability to cut yourself off from education, especially in these communities like in the South, where they say you want to become a mom and a wife as fast as you can. There's nothing wrong with being a mom and a wife. There is something wrong with being a mom and a wife when you've never left your hometown before, when
Mhm,
you
mhm.
literally live on the same block that you grew up in. I don't think I don't think that'll ever benefit a person to limit themselves and scope themselves. And so, of course, those are the exact same people that are going to believe Fox News because the news can't lie. Why would the news allow lies to be put on TV that are going to join a multi-level marketing scheme that are probably going to get roped into high interest credit cards and also religion?
And the reason why it's such a problem is because it happens when you're a child. You know,
Yes.
you don't
Yes.
see Christians often uh, being convinced of Islam, right? And
Right.
you don't because they have already been programmed. That bandwidth is taken up by Christianity, something that was given to them when they were 2 or 3 years old, 4 years old, in their formative years. And this isn't me coming up with this argument. This is a popular one, but I'm just going to
Right.
restate it. When you're young like that, you need protection. You've got these big people, right, that are old. Like my son is 2, and he looks at me, and he must look at me like he saw me mowing the lawn yesterday, and he looked at me, or not yesterday, but recently, looked at me mesmerized, like my dad is doing that, right? But that when you're that age and you're growing up and you need protection, you need food, you need shelter, you need people to tell you how to navigate through life. You look at these old big people that clearly must know something because they've made it so far and so
Yes.
long, that what they're saying must be true. And
Yes.
that acts like a virus. It just manifests itself generation after generation. And
Yes.
the 5-year-olds, the 2-year-olds keep getting programmed by the generations that come
Yes.
before them. And when that happens in an environment where there is not access to a lot of resources, it's likely to stay that way unchecked. And then when
Yes.
you have built a lifetime of being susceptible to these fantasies, you're I think just more susceptible to other fantasies that are aligned, right?
Yeah.
So when I say you don't see a lot of adult Christians getting converted to Islam, no, but you will see adult Christians be converted to political movements by other adult Christians,
Yes.
something that pulls from that Christianity to allow itself to continue, you know?
Yes.
And so we get these tyrannical political leaders who quote the Bible and everybody goes, aha, the Bible. I'm going to follow that guy, right?
Yep.
Because they've been following the guy with the Bible their entire life. Uh,
Yes.
and I digress a little bit, but I get
No.
very passionate about it. You know, this is not just happening in the United States. This happens in Islamic countries. I have flown all over the Middle East, and I have flown and looked out the window of an aircraft in areas where I am like, there is not a highway, there is not a railroad, but there are these little villages, and they're on these rivers, and there are
Yep.
people fetching water, and there are women dressed in their long garb, and men who are not as clothed, but you know, they've got their look, and they've probably looked that way for millennia, and
Yes.
they've never been checked. That ideology has never been checked, and it's amazing to see some of the Afghan people that I've worked with challenge their views because they have exposure to Americans and British people, and you know, people from all over Europe, bringing new views in, bringing cell phones in, bringing things that they otherwise wouldn't have. And when that doesn't happen, then the problem just kind of manifests itself, and it keeps
Yeah.
happening. And so it
Yes.
happens in Islamic countries, it happens in Hindu countries,
Yes.
you know, it happens all over.
Yeah, it even happens here. So one of the things I see from um either it like longtime atheists or people who grew up secular or people from secular countries, like I feel like there's a lot of secular countries in Europe, is they say, why don't like I don't understand why these people are so worried about what their families think. Why don't they just cut those people off? Why don't they just leave? Why don't they just get out? And when you're someone like us who has been in different places of the world. I lived in Chicago for 15 years, right? Like I was raised in Northwest Arkansas, but I lived in Chicago. I've lived in Nashville. I've been to Europe. You've traveled all over. When you've seen things and you've been places and you've really like stretched your wings outside of that circle where you were raised, if somebody says like you're not going to church, like that's going to hurt your grandma's feelings or that's going to hurt your auntie's feelings, you think, oops,
Yeah,
I'll see her on Christmas and I'll give her a present, she'll be fine. But when your auntie and your grandma are the only people that you associate with on a daily basis, maybe they live on the same street, maybe they live down the block, your nephew is coming over every day, is like part of the daily routine. When you start to doubt and people say, "Wow, you don't think you're a Christian anymore?" That's really gonna hurt your
that
family's feelings.
that can be
Devastating. Yep.
life threatening, and that is the problem, that is the crossroads between religion, culture, and your identity, right?
Yep.
This is where you have no escape, and it almost doesn't even matter if it's true to some of these people, right? It's
Literally.
just what you do. It's the
Yes.
formula to life. It's how we live. This is
Yes.
the way it is. And to
Yep.
challenge that structure
Yep.
can be threatening to other people and can in turn be a threat to yourself. And so,
Yes.
you know, our experiences in coming out of that religion or these religions has to be delicate at times and very
Yeah.
different from one another.
Yeah. And it's evident all over the place. Like the number of people who've reached out to me on Facebook in the last 3 years that I've had my podcast and have been like, "Hey, I can't add this show to my Spotify, but I want you to know that I listen to every episode. I
Uh-huh.
can't add it, I can't like the posts, I can't share it, but I want you to know that I listen to it." It's like, okay, so there are people in these towns, in these environments who are also questioning, who I remember feeling like I was an absolute traitor when I first started having thoughts about like, maybe this isn't real, maybe this isn't true. Um, I feel like almost as common as the angry atheist phase is the overcompensating because you're not ready to not be Christian anymore phase.
Yeah.
Like because at least in the Baptist church, they tell you, you know, once you go to college or you go out in the real world and you start hanging out with people, they're going to make you question God. They're going to make you question your faith. And they're going to make it look like it's not that bad. They're not going to be
Mhm.
mean to you. They're going to be nice. You're going to want to go to their parties. You're going to want to hang out with them and you're going to start wanting to agree with them. And that's the devil working. So when I'm 21, 22, and I start meeting new people and I move to a big city and I start being asked questions that I don't really have answers to, I panicked because
Mm.
I was like, this is what they were warning me about all
Mhm.
that time.
Mhm.
This is me letting the devil in and letting the devil win by asking those questions. So I'm going to double down and be an even better Christian than I was before. And then I was posting Bible verses on Instagram. I was going to church twice a week instead of once a week. I was like reading devotional every day when in reality, I knew that the questions weren't going anywhere. They were sticking around. Now, in my case, I took some shrooms and then it just was downhill from there. I was never a Christian ever again. But for some people, it's years of that. It's years of doing, like you said, the routine, the performative nature. I bet if you go to some of these small towns and you get people alone and you're like, do you
Yeah.
actually believe that everyone came from Adam and Eve? They'll be like, no, but the Bible.
Part of the reason I felt like I had to get involved with the Atheist Community of Austin and I had to be outspoken is because when I found them, I didn't know that people were having those conversations, right? And I was one of the people who was just mind blown because I learned that other people that were out there that were feeling like this were speaking about it openly and to
Yes.
an entire network, like to entire country, really. I mean, if you're on YouTube, if you're on a public access channel, your ideas are out there, and maybe people are afraid to speak up, but at least they're listening, and you know that you're probably helping them just by being there for
Yes.
them. And so
Yes.
I feel like, man, I can do that. There might be some people in these corners of these communities where they just know that their world would collapse on them if they made a drastic change like this. But just having me to listen to, maybe that'll be helpful.
Yes. Yes. And the idea that it never escapes me that what we're doing right now is punishable by death in many
Oh,
countries right now.
yeah.
And so it's like, I know that I won't lose everything I've ever lived for if I'm outspoken about these things. And you luckily seem like you wouldn't lose everything you've ever lived for by being
Right.
outspoken. So there are people who would lose everything if they chose to be open about their lack of beliefs or their questions. And so it's like, why not? Like, the worst I'm going to get is like a lecture from my dad when he's like, do you got to tell everybody about this? It's like,
Yeah.
it's just
Right.
YouTube, Dad.
Yeah.
But like, there are some people who are literally afraid they will lose their whole family, especially when you talk about like Jehovah's Witnesses, who they're instructed to cut off any
Yeah.
member as though
That's
they are
horrible.
deceased.
This
Right.
is horrible. And for a God to command you to do that, but that same God also gave you the survival instincts to care for your family. It's just so ambiguous, right? And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. I don't understand, how people can react that way to their family. But I guess it comes down to power, in my opinion. And the way that societies are structured, the way that these, man, I'm gonna back this up a little bit, but we end up with these structures because of, I think, our instinct to survive, right? Which is very tribal in its most archaic form. Luckily for us, we are thinking beings. We have the ability to reason, and the conflict that we have as a species is one where we are constantly fighting against our natural instincts, right? Our instinct is to support the tribe. It's to support the group that's going to
Yep.
keep us alive.
Yep.
Some people can't see beyond their immediate family or their immediate town as being part of a larger tribe. They just see that immediate group, and that's their group, right? That's where racism comes from. That's where forms of bigotry come from. Anything that challenges that structure that they've ended up with because of their drive to solidify an alliance so that they can all help each other survive. We are symbiotic creatures, right? We want to do that instinctively. Now, as the smart thinking beings that we are, I think opening the door to becoming part of like the human tribe, not to be like, I don't know, that's a little squishy, I don't know. I don't know. It's like lovey dovey, and I get it. I'm not, people might call me things, tree hugging hippie, things like, whatever.
Mr. Clean.
Right. But the fact of the matter is, we don't need to fight each other and divide ourselves because of these, silly differences. And they're differences that we create. We construct them. They're not even tangible.
They're not real.
Yeah.
None of it's real.
Yeah. It's all a myth. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, something else I think that tricks people, or that gets people, or that convinces people, is the idea that humans are rarely ever 100% wrong. And so when somebody tells you something like, "Oh, saving money is really good for you." You're like, "Oh, okay." And they're like, "Yeah, get a job, have a good resume, and you'll be like a responsible adult." And then they're like, "Okay." And they're like, "Yeah, you should stop smoking. That's bad for you." And you're like, "Okay." And they're like, "Have you ever heard about Jesus?"
Yeah.
And you're like, "Nothing else this person has ever said
Right.
has led me astray.
Right.
They seem pretty smart. They're trustworthy, whether they're related to me or there's somebody in my community, maybe they took me to the pool all the time with their kids as a kid. Like, they would never lead me astray. They took care of my sick dog. So, okay, yeah, I'll hear him about
But
Jesus."
what you have just described is somebody, right, taking advice because they need guidance, because they
Yes.
need help. And religion is so successful, indoctrinating people that need help, that are in a bad position, people
Yes.
that can essentially be taken advantage of, the impoverished, the poor, especially of the Middle Ages, let's say, or
Yes.
even in different religions, you've got different castes, or you've got different classes that you
Mm,
never really get out of. But the idea of having an afterlife where you get everything you want, well,
yeah.
that's a life worth living, right? And so
Yes.
if I'm a serf, on the farm, on the what do you call it, on the fiefdom, if you will, in medieval times, I might be poor and I might scrounge my whole life, but I'm going to get what I want. And that's where
Yes.
religion has been so successful, because these people really had nothing to look forward to except an afterlife. That's why Mithraism and other religions that offered an afterlife in gladiatorial times were so popular among soldiers and gladiators, because they're going to die. Like, they are going to die.
Yes.
What better way to die than a soldier's or a gladiator's death? The Norse had this thing as well. When you're a soldier in Norse culture, or in Viking culture rather, you died and went to Valhalla. Not everybody went to Valhalla, but the
Right.
soldiers did. The soldiers did, and they probably had the shortest lifespan of anybody. And so, that just goes to show you, I think, when people are in a real bind, they are more susceptible to believe
Yes.
something that sounds good to them.
Yes, and, sometimes when people find out that I'm a Christian, or they're not a Christian, oh god, that I'm an atheist. Oh god, wait, oh, sorry, I've been converted live on camera.
What is your
Um,
purpose for having me on here exactly?
turns out I've just been trying to convert you, Jimmy, damn it.
Yeah,
Um, when people find out I'm an atheist, one of the first things they say is like, "Well, food banks, churches do food banks, they do food drives, they do all this stuff. Do you want them to just stop doing those things and helping the community?" And my argument is, if in order to get this free meal as a homeless person, I also have to sit through a sermon, you're doing it for the wrong reasons,
yeah,
right? I like to be nice to people just to be nice to people. I'm not nice to people so that they have a moment for our atheist, our anti-Lord and Savior. I don't bring it up if people don't ask about it. If you are genuinely doing good for the sake of doing good, you shouldn't have to then also be like, "Do you know who really gave you this sandwich? Jesus Christ, your Lord and Savior. Do you know who
sure,
that is?" It's
yeah,
like, it's different if they're, like, feeding everyone and the people eating the food are like, "Where did this come from?" And they're like, "Oh, First Baptist Church." If you're interested, we have services on Sunday. That's different because you give somebody a choice. They can come on Sunday, they can't, if they're only there on Thursdays for the food. If they're not, you're not gonna call them out on it. It doesn't matter. But if in order to receive what I need, I have to then also listen to you basically give me the same pitch I would get for, like, one of those timeshares in Florida in
sure,
order to get the coupon, that's where I have a problem with it. If I only helped my neighbor if they listened to my podcast and learned about atheism, that doesn't make me a nice person. That makes me a business person.
yeah,
That makes
yeah,
me a shrewd business person. And so I will always consider that still taking advantage of the needy until they stop forcing the biblical aspect on you in order for you to benefit from what it is they're supposedly doing to help the neighborhood and to help the community.
Yeah, and I would say also, you don't need a church to do that. You know, if you're
Right.
when you're doing that, you are just putting on an act. You know,
Yep.
you are showing people how good you are. It's like the person that gives a homeless person $1 but captures the whole thing on video. You know,
Yes.
like
Yes.
you don't need to go to a church to be nice to people or to help people, right?
Right.
But the other problem I have with that as well is that the homeless person will take it. They'll take the sermon, you know, and they'll keep taking the sermon. And more people will keep taking the sermon because they need it. And
Yep.
before you know it, you've got yourself a following that's dependent on you. And
Right.
that happens, that is the way that, you know, religion can be infectious as well. And there's this great story that I like to tell. I won't, you know, just in case this person sees this, I don't want them to know I'm, you know, I don't want to mention them outright, but I will say that there is somebody I know very well who is a clergy member. And there was one time where they were telling a story. They said, you know, this veteran, you know, came to the church and they needed help, and they came to me, and you know, I don't know what it's like to be in combat, but I did go through this thing, and you know, that was really stressful. And the thing that the person was talking about legitimately would probably be combat, you know, would be a way that you can empathize with somebody in combat that's gone through combat. So I say, you know, kudos to you for using your experience to try and help somebody. But then that person said, you know, isn't it amazing the way that God works with people, works through people, and it's just amazing the way God uses people. And they did that. And I'm like, this person probably had no health benefits and said, who can I go to get some support? The church, because
Yep.
the church will give me what I want as long as I sit there and listen and pretend to be just like them. I mean, that's what's really happening. You know, this
Yes.
is not some higher calling. And you know, the thing is, when things like that happen, church members, religious people find a way to legitimize their fantasy, right? They have found a way to make their story work because they can
Yeah.
point to something and say, "Hey, see, you know," but really that's not what I see, you know. And you know, it just takes a little bit of introspection, I think, on that person's part to say, hey, what are
Yes.
you really doing?
Right, right. And that example you brought up is such a good example of the people who like, "Hey man, here's $20 for lunch. Let me post it on my TikTok."
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, Somebody actually told me that when they visited LA, they were surprised at how often they tried to give money to a homeless person, and they said, "Not on camera, not on camera," because 'cause they're so used to people doing nice things for them and trying to film it for content
Wow.
that they'll
Wow.
literally be like, "I don't wanna be on camera. I don't," and he's like, "Whoa, I'm just trying to give you some cash."
Mm-hmm.
Um which speaks volumes. And that's not even religious. That's just another example of somebody using disadvantaged
Yes.
individuals for like the
Yes.
grift. And I just think that there's a big difference between, look, we've welcomed the downtrodden, the lonely, the homeless, the needy. There's a big difference between that and I've built a militia of pseudo believers who depend on me for survival and will do whatever I tell them they need to do in order to continue to survive. I'm curious how many of those same people, if they woke up the next day with a full bank account and a house and food, would continue to go to church? How many of those people are in basically a codependent relationship that is just as abusive, whether they realize it or not, um, because they need that help, that survival, like whether it's food, whether it's shelter, or how many people would say, like, I don't actually believe that. I don't need that anymore. I'm gonna move on to something different. If you're truly trying to encourage people to recognize that something is good for them, you shouldn't have to do it in such a salesy way, in such
Yeah.
a public
Yeah.
way. And, you know, people might come on and be like, "Well, what's the difference between what you're doing versus what they're doing? You know, you're up on here and you're talking your thoughts and opinions. It's like, well, one, I've never once tried to proselytize atheism to a religious person I've had on my podcast. And in fact, quite the opposite. I've given them the floor and let them talk.
Hmm.
Two, I've never once given somebody something so that they would be atheist. I've never helped a person and been like, you should come to this, you should listen to my podcast, you should be an atheist, you know. And also, when you do something that only benefits a small group of people, like, oh, well, not even a small group of people, when you do something, when you help people because it helps you in the afterlife, when you're giving out sandwiches because you want heaven points, when you're donating to the needy because you think God's watching and adding a tally to your score, if anything, I think that is a win for us because we don't think we're getting anything for proselytizing for
And
our team.
we're not threatening anybody either if they
No.
don't listen to us, right?
Right.
We are not giving them the worst possible outcome that imaginable if
Right.
they don't take the sandwich. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So I can hand out sandwiches all day and tell people how good atheism is, and I'm still not half as bad as a
Right.
religious movement.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, this is a very self-fulfilling way of relating to people and just saying, "Hey, I'm different, and here's why."
Yeah.
And I don't need you to believe what I believe, but I just need you to not threaten me
Yeah.
with your beliefs. And that's where our friction would come in.
Right. Right. And also, you know, people have said, you know, why should I listen to you? It's like, you should, like, great question. Like, I'm not,
Yeah,
there's no
yeah.
reason you, but also, I don't think I'm getting points. I'm not trying to convert anyone. I'm not doing nice things for views or for clout or for whatever. Um, but also, if you've got two people and they're both offering you a sandwich, and one says, "Take this sandwich from Jesus, but also if you don't get to know Jesus, you're going to burn in hell forever." And the other person says, "Take this sandwich, we're all gonna fucking die." Like, you're just not gonna tell me that the second person, even if they tell you about atheism, is doing as much damage as the person who's like, "Oh, also, have you ever heard of the rapture?"
Yeah, right, right. It's it's a really sad thing. It's a sad thing to know that people do this to their kids.
Yeah.
I remember being told, and look, I love my mother, still in my life. She's my best friend, right? Tomorrow's her birthday. Shout out to my
"Oh,
mom.
happy birthday to
Yeah.
Junior's mom."
But I think this was a kind of a joke, like a couple of jokes she told me when I was really young, but I don't think she knows how much it stuck with me my whole life. There was one time we got bunk beds, and my brother and I were fighting who was going to get the top, right? And I got the top. And my mom goes, "Well, now you're closer to God." And I laid there terrified, terrified. I was like, "Oh my God, I made a mistake. I don't want the top bunk." Um, that was scary. That was a scary
Yeah.
night's sleep, but that stuck
That's
with me
fucked
for
up.
a long time. I feel like that was just a microcosm of kind of the fear I felt at other times in my life. And it's not my mom's fault.
Right.
This is just the way that life turned out.
Right. Right.
And yeah, there were a couple, there was plenty of instances of that growing up. Not at home, not just at home, but through society. And you get the fear of God put in you over a lifetime, and it ends up working,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
sad. It's
Well,
just sad.
and something important to remember, especially for people going through that angry atheist phase, if they are, is, and this took me years to come to the understanding or the realization of, is the people who said the stuff to us, the religious stuff to us that stuck with us the most, also truly believed they were doing the right thing.
Yeah, that's right.
They sincerely believe that when you either come to them and tell you you're an atheist, or they just find out you're an atheist, they sincerely believe that you are going to burn in hell forever, and that they are the only people who can try and love you enough to convince you to change your mind. And because it's easy to look at religion and people like your pastor and stuff like that and be mad at them and be like, you tricked me, you duped me, I feel like you were laughing at me the whole time, you think I'm
Yeah.
fucking dumb. But no, they sincerely believe they are doing the right thing, and they sincerely have fear in their heart that somebody they love is going to burn for eternity, and that's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's like watching your loved one, like, do crack in front of you for the first time, and then when you try to intervene, they're like, "How dare you try to influence my beliefs," right?
Yeah.
And the and also blame the people who told them that it was their fault that their kids are going to hell,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Because at least in the South, there's not only the personal ownership of your own faith, but there's also how you're viewed. And so it's like not only do they think they failed somehow because you're not a Christian, but now everyone in the community also knows that they failed them and they failed God because you are going to burn in hell. And like that is some of the worst mind fuckery, for lack of a better term.
That's right.
And that helped me, honestly, that like sucked me right out of my angry atheist phase, cuz I'm like, "Oh, I should be angry for them, not at them."
Mhm. Mhm.
Obviously, there's exceptions. Like I have several conspiracies that people like Benny Hinn or Joel Osteen aren't actually Christians, they're just business people. I don't think they actually believe in God at all, but that's like a
No,
whole other
there's
thing.
yeah.
Um After a certain level, I stop believing that they actually believe what they're saying. But even as far as like the pastor at your church or whoever his boss is, whoever he reports to, I think they sincerely believe what they're saying. That doesn't excuse being a bigot, being closed-minded, being judgmental. That doesn't excuse that for me. But when people tell you these like contrived religious things in order to get you to stop being atheist or in order to get you to keep coming to church, they honestly think that they are doing the Lord's work. And to
Mhm.
me,
Mhm.
that's the scariest part about it.
Yeah. You know, I hope I don't even know if I hope that they really believe. Um, but I think that it becomes very political in religious realms as well, right? I
Yeah.
think I think that the church structure, especially in the small town America, is a structure that is centered very much on who's in charge and who's in control, right? There's in my mind, there's got to be a point. Some of these people that are in these powerful positions of influence have to, just like you say about Joel Osteen, right? They have to know that their interests or their actions conflict with what's in the Bible. I mean, they've got to. And at some point, they just decide to do it anyway. And at that point, are they not admitting to themselves that their religion is false?
Yep.
You know, I want to put out, I'm sitting here looking up here because I thought I had the book. I do. I'm going to stand up for a moment and I'm going to grab this book, right? Um, is it okay if I do that?
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Totally. As
All
long
right.
as you have pants on, you're good.
Yeah. So I hope Dave Warnock doesn't mind, but I read this book he wrote called Childish Things, right?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. If you have ever wanted to read an account about the way that religion can infect your family, can corrupt a community, can corrupt a church organization, learn about the hierarchy of the church and the way that that can be politicized and weaponized against its very own members, this is the book to do it. And my heart broke when I read it. I read it in about a week and then I messaged him on Twitter and he messaged me back. I've never met him. And I said, dude, I am so sorry that you had to go through that. And, you know, I can't sit here and read this book and come across some of the characters in this book, true story, by the way, and say, these people absolutely believed in Christianity. So I
Right.
do, to your point, I think there are people out there that genuinely want to save us and
Yeah.
genuinely want to help us. But there are also others, and these are probably the worst ones,
Yeah.
that know what they're doing is wrong, but it benefits them, so they do it anyway. And that's what we were
Yes.
talking about filming the dollar to the homeless people, right?
Yes.
About doing the food drive and proselytizing. I mean, this kind of need to just be in control, I think, has a lot to do with the way religion is used for bad. Um,
Yes.
and
Yes.
so that's kind of a big problem and a driver for me
Yeah.
to speak out against it.
Yeah, and I also think we should account for the number of people that are in the middle. So, like, maybe they do believe in God, but also they know that if they build huts on a mission trip, and if they get that tattoo that's a Bible verse, and if they make sure they're on the first couple of pews every Sunday, they also know that that will get them some social tokens and some heaven tokens. And so I think that's also somebody that you're allowed to be angry at too. Somebody who maybe they do sincerely believe that God's real. Maybe they don't believe everything the Bible says, but they believe you need to be saved or whatever. But they also recognize, like a bully of mine in high school, her dad was a pastor. And so like
Yeah.
Monday, Tuesday, she'd be like mean to everybody. And then Wednesday it would be come to my dad's church. Come to my
Mm.
dad's church. And like I believe that she believed in God, but I also believe that she knew she was kind of a bitch at
Yeah,
the
right,
same
right,
time. And like
right.
she knew those heaven, like she did not like me at all, but she knew she'd get some points with God and Jesus in her church if I came to church because she invited me from high school.
And
Um
the
my
problem oh, sorry, go ahead, go
no,
ahead.
you're no,
I'm
continue.
getting ahead of myself. No, but you know what the problem with that is that the Bible really doesn't lay out a punishment for people who are bullies, right?
Nope.
It doesn't at all, actually. In fact, it rewards that in several stories in the Bible, and it really only punishes people who don't do exactly as the church says. That's the only punishment, right? So you can be however you want to be as long as you do exactly what the church says. Believe in Jesus, right? But
Right.
really do what they say. You're good. So
Yeah.
it doesn't surprise me that some people just act however they want. It fits. It kind of fits with their religion, doesn't it?
Use ask forgiveness. Like I got saved when I was 9. So I'm good. No
Yeah.
matter how many episodes of this podcast I do, no matter how often I'm on an atheist live stream, according to the rules, I was washed in the blood of the lamb back
Mm.
when I was 9 or 10 and I'm good. And you cannot be unsaved. You cannot lose your salvation. So why would I?
So I want to if we can,
Yeah,
I wrote this note down
let's do it.
earlier in the show, and I want to harken back to that before we go anywhere else, right? So you made an interesting point, and you said your brand, right? When you go on Facebook, you're not like pushing out all these anti-religious things, and it's really not your brand in that arena.
Yeah.
I have a hard time controlling that a little bit, right? Because there's a funny ambiguity to being in the military. Okay. And so when you're in uniform or when people find out that you serve in the military, they automatically accept you, right?
Yep.
Especially the conservative folks, right? They will accept you and claim you as one of their own, right? For example, in my parents' church, I know that my pastor will say a prayer for me because they know that I am in service and I've been overseas. And they're so proud of you. They're so
They are.
proud of you.
Yes.
And you're so smart and you're doing great things for this country. And then they find out you're an atheist and you're a brainwashed idiot. And, it's like I have a hard time with the fact that somebody could be so loving and accepting of me, right? And in the very same, very, very same sentence, if you will, flip the switch. And so there are still other people out there that think I have a great deal of credibility because I have some military service, I've got some education. And so for those people to think this guy's got some credibility, I almost like to brand myself as an atheist so that they can make a decision about me, right?
Yeah.
I want to force them into a position where they have to confront their own ideology because it rests or their relationship with me rests upon it. Right.
Yes.
So they've got me on this pedestal because I'm a good old American, right? But I'm also not a Christian, and I think Christianity is not a good thing.
Yes.
Now, what do you do? And
Yes.
so I actually, when I find an opportunity to say, well, hey, what do you think about this? And I'll throw my brand out there. Yeah, I can't help it. I really
Yeah.
can't help it. And so I thought it was because I try so hard to just let people have a peaceful social media experience, right? Just go on, look at your photos, and then I see a Bible verse and I'm like,
Ugh.
all right,
Ugh.
now we're turning it on,
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to say that I thought that that was a brilliant way to categorize that on your part. You know, your
Thanks.
brand. What's my
Thanks.
brand? I never thought of it like that. And so I made a note of it, and I wanted to make sure that I like brought that point up, because I can't tell you how many conversations I have with people. I was out with my cousins one time for one of their birthdays, and this guy was talking to me, and Fox News was on, and I was not interested.
Yeah.
And he's like, "So what do you do anyway?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm actually in the military." And that was it. I should have never told him that. But you know, he
You
kept
just starts
talking to
like
me,
salivating.
and I'm like, "Dude, I don't care. I actually don't care about that person. I don't care about that person." He's like, "Well, you should care." And I'm like, "I'm out for my cousin's birthday. Like, get out of my face, dude." And so that is like a constant thing. I have to like not be honest with people about who I am sometimes, because I'm just afraid of the backlash I'll face.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and
And
the
it feels to be kind of safe to do that too. So
yeah, well, and
yeah.
the brand thing, so, like, I definitely have a Facebook page for my podcast. I definitely like, if somebody posts, like, if an atheist I know posts something, I'll comment, it's not like a secret, but the way I see it is I am an amalgamation of different things that
Mhm,
create
mhm.
who I am as a brand. And so I'm a sister, I'm a wife, I have parrots, I have a dog. I really like making bracelets. I have an Etsy store, and I'm an atheist, and I have a podcast. And the people who make me the craziest are the people whose entire personality are Jesus love, Jesus love, Jesus love. Because there's just no way that you're going to tell me they sincerely live a life where every moment of the day they're serving God. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
They wake up tired like I do. They probably say a bad word on their way out the door. They've yelled at their kids in a way they wish they hadn't. They fought with their spouse, yada, yada, yada. And when I see Christians like post so much about being a Christian, it's very reminiscent of that Facebook friend we all have whose relationship is so all over the place that you're like, oh, y'all are fighting. Like,
Yeah,
y'all are
yeah,
like
yeah.
this close to divorce. And so my I see it as the more I post about atheism, the less people I think would believe the sincerity
Yeah,
from me, if
yep,
that makes sense.
yep.
No, it makes sense, City. It makes sense. Don't ask people if that makes sense. I need to learn not to do that. Um, so but I don't think that about everyone. So I have lots of people that I've connected with on Facebook that are atheists that post about it, and I don't think they're grandstanding. I don't think they're performing. But for me personally and my personality, I know that if I went out of my way to post about it, people would either say, wow, she's really trying to just piss off her mom, or they would say, she's so staunch about this atheism stuff. She actually looks kind of scared. I bet she's actually afraid of like Jesus Christ. You know how people accuse us of hating God? And we're
Yeah,
like, we
yeah,
don't hate
of
God.
course.
We don't believe in God.
Yeah, yeah.
I would rather people find out they've been liking my jokes on Facebook for 10 years and I'm an atheist and they can't like take back that they've already told me they think I'm hilarious than feel the righteousness they would feel in unfriending me because I'm an atheist.
Yeah, yeah.
I want them to feel like they've been duped as much as I felt like I was duped because they love me, they think I'm funny, they bought my bracelets, whatever, blah, blah, blah. They've shared my memes, and then she's been an atheist the whole time. Like, I've been duped. And it's like, I
That
gotcha.
that is hilarious, and that is a perspective I haven't really heard before, and so that might be a tactic I have to
It's an
employ. I
insidious takeover.
I actually created, so Jimmy Jr. is actually a pseudonym. So I operate under this name to separate myself kind of from my career.
Yeah.
But I do have a private Facebook post for my own personal life, which is the one that I try to like just be peaceful on. But I have a Jimmy Jr. Facebook where all hell breaks loose, of
Yeah.
course. But yeah, I think that your perspective there is a pretty interesting one, and I would love to see if there was like a study that could be done. I would love to see the data on that. How many people were heartbroken after a 10-year period, after they endorsed this person for so long, right? I will say on my Facebook, on my personal Facebook, I don't know what it is, but lately it's been a lot less political and less religious than I've seen it. I don't know if
Yeah.
anybody else is experiencing that, but I feel
Yes.
like we got to a point as a country where everybody was just way out there with their beliefs, and all of a sudden, I don't see it that much anymore. Like, not as much as I used to. And I am not garnering, when I post like a meme of about like, religion or MAGA, because let's face it, I'm not a MAGA supporter. I'm
What?
I'm I'm very much against that movement.
I
But
am shocked.
when I post something about that, I get very little reaction to it, very little response, almost nothing. And it almost feels like people just don't want to be bothered with this stuff in public anymore. And that's actually a good thing, right?
Yes.
I think that's great.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think also, this is just me speculating, but I think, and I don't even think the people recognize this connection, but I think it's like psychological. People were really hurt by Donald Trump when he basically promoted the January 6th takeover and then didn't pardon a single person who got arrested for it. I think that was like the final nail in a lot of people's coffin in terms of, I literally can't figure out how to support him anymore because he turned his back on us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that exact same thought process that makes people like kind of introspect for the first time, also, without them even realizing it, makes them question everything they've been told recently. And because Trump was so Bible, God, like literal photoshopped AI images of him like being touched on the shoulder by Christ, I think people are starting to take a step back and go, whoa, like I was a little in too deep. And so they're
Yeah.
staying quiet.
So I have a confession I want to make. I was one of those people. And
Really?
I was. So let me explain. Because I think a lot of people look at me and they would be surprised to know that I did vote for Donald Trump in 2016.
I
Okay.
am shocked by that, actually.
And nobody, no, I don't, I obviously can't brag about it. I'm actually embarrassed by it.
I
And
think it's a great story, though.
I felt like I was caught up in a desperate act. And I will tell you this. I knew the guy was full of shit. So I didn't believe any of the religious stuff that he was saying. I hardly believed any of the things, any of the idealistic kind of mindset that he had when he misquoted the Bible and said 2 Corinthians, right? It's 2 Corinthians, right? Like he's just such a con artist.
Right.
But when he said, I was so desperate because as somebody who studies history and politics, I really couldn't bring myself to vote for Hillary Clinton just because this is supposed to be the bastion of females and equal rights. And, she is accepting money from Saudi Arabia, who will still execute homosexuals, where women were not allowed to drive at the time. They were not allowed to serve in government. And I was so a mounting national debt, right? And I'm so tired of the fight between Democrat and Republican that this guy stood up and he goes, I know how to fix the system because I'm one of the broken pieces. And I know exactly why it's broken because I took it and I used it to my advantage. And I went, holy shit, we might actually have somebody that is not in politics, right? That brags about not being a politician, brags about using the broken system to benefit himself and wants to genuinely fix it. And I was willing to let a lot pass. And it should have been the end way earlier than it was for me.
Yeah.
My vote never should have been in favor of Donald Trump. And I'm embarrassed that other people were like, dude, what the fuck is wrong with you? My best friend is African-American and had arguments with me. Like I went to visit him in Thailand and this was in 2016. And he's like, dude, this guy, Donald Trump, literally in front of a crowd said, where's my African-American? He's like, what the fuck are you talking about to me? And I'm like, I know he did, but I'm telling you, this guy's different than everybody else, And it wasn't long after that where I realized I've been duped.
Yeah.
Like I was so desperate for our government to operate efficiently that I did something that I can never take back. Well, I took it back in 2020. I can tell you that. And and I'm going to take it back again in 2024. I feel like I was part of the problem and I feel like I was one of those people that was just so desperate. And I can see how it happens, how it keeps happening though, that I don't understand. So when is the cutoff, right? The cutoff should have been when he mocked the disabled reporter. Then the cutoff should have been when he mocked John McCain, a great American, for getting captured, for giving himself up and staying in Vietnamese captivity, right? Then it should have been over with the tape about how he bragged about sexual assault. It should have been over when we realized that he's probably cheating on all of his wives, or cheated on all of his wives. I mean, there are so many red flags, and I was so willing to put them aside for a combination of wanting something different and already knowing that he was full of shit, that, maybe this guy is so full of shit that he might actually do some good. Maybe these people that he's courting, he's just courting them so they can do the right thing in the end. And not only did he not do that, he went so far off the fucking Richter scale that it's bad. It just got bad. It got so bad.
Yeah.
And January 6th, I feel a great deal of like personal responsibility for. So anyway, I've never told anybody that on any of these shows. I do these shows a lot, and I am not a Donald Trump supporter. I'm not even necessarily, I'm not a Republican supporter, although I can see where some conservative ideals make sense. At this point, I feel like, man, we have to do the right thing, right? We have to,
right.
Since we're allowed to talk about voting and our political alliances, we can't get this one wrong, right? We can't get this one wrong.
Right.
And take it from somebody who's gotten it wrong. So
yeah. But I think that admission, well, first of all, thank you for being open and honest about that, because that's not something easy to be open and honest about. And as somebody who used to loud and proud promote that I was a Republican Christian, I get it. I never voted for Trump. I came out of the umbrella right as he was running for president. But I think one of the most important, impactful, one of the most, there's like a word I'm looking for, but basically one of the most important aspects, I think, of being an atheist and being an open and outspoken atheist is having that history that like haunts us and like keeps us awake at night. Like I'm washing my hair in the shower and my heart just palpitates because I remember some ignorant fucking shit that I said, that I lived by, that I posted on Facebook, that I shared, that when people in the comments were trying to be helpful, like, are you sure that's how you feel? Because what about, you're like, no, this is me. I will never change because I'm 21 and I know what I think for the rest of my life. At least we now can point to specific things and be like, I was one of them. That's why I'm talking about this. I was you. I was this. I'm embarrassed about it. It's humiliating. But I can either take that embarrassment and just bury it, or I can take that embarrassment and fuel my opportunities to say out loud, I've changed, people change, opinions change, misinformation is a plague, and I am sorry, and I will do whatever I need to do to make up the difference. I think that is huge. And I tell like my friends all the time, I'm like, one of these days somebody is going to pull up one of those old statuses, those old videos, those old tweets, and they're going to be like, Sydney talks all the time about this, but in 2013 she didn't feel that way. And I'll at least be able to link 17 different episodes of something that exists on the internet where I've personally said, I was like that. I said those things. I used those words. And boy, was I wrong. Am I embarrassed? I can never take it back. But every day from here on out, I can do my best to try and make up for what I did.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I want to, if you don't mind, I want to stay on this topic, but I kind of want to switch it for a second.
Yeah.
And so this movement that we've seen by Christian, and by the way, I was already an atheist, and I was already like not outspoken, but I was so far gone from my religion that I still went down that path. I confused myself thinking about it. But in any case, this alignment with the far right in this country and conservative Christians is not just unique, right? So India just yesterday elected Narendra Modi, their prime minister, for the third consecutive term, which is historic because only the founder of India, the modern Republic of India, has been elected 3 times, right? But the thing that the reason how the way that Modi was able to fuel his base is by being the bastion of Hinduism in India, right? And the far right Hindu people for 2 decades were like, yes, more Modi, more Modi. And they have a population of 1.3 billion, and, you know,
Wow.
80% are Hindu.
Wow.
200 million is 15% of that. And that's how much the Islamic population is in India. Think about that.
Wow.
Think about that. 15% of India is 2/3 of the United States. Like,
Wow.
that's insane,
That's so
right?
many people.
But just yesterday, he was elected and he actually lost a bunch of seats in parliament. So he no longer has the hold over the government that he has had. And the reason why is people are now starting to kind of turn against him, and their support is dying down a little bit because he's been so harsh against Muslims in India, right? And I think that shows us some hope, right? When
Yes.
you have, you know, a billion people that say, go India, go Modi, go Hinduism, and then they respond by taking some of his power away because of how he has acted towards the other minorities, maybe there's some hope. Maybe this Christian conservative movement dies down. You know, maybe people start to realize, you know, we were duped because Narendra Modi in India failed to create jobs. He failed to really industrialize the country. People are still in poor education, in poor agricultural communities, no upward mobility. They're still being pigeonholed to the same thing over and over, and they don't want that anymore. And I think that, you know, they realize that they've been duped over the last
Yes.
15 years. They have been duped. And I just only hope that in our own country, you know, we start to see, maybe I've been duped too. I did
Yeah.
it. I realized I was duped, not only, you know, in the political aspect, but, you know, in the religious aspect across my life. And somebody in the comments said, you know, it's called growth. And I think that that's so important. You know, we need to be able to admit to ourselves that it's time to change. There is nothing wrong with saying, I got it wrong. You know,
Right.
we're seeing it play out on a grand scale, and we can do the same thing. We can be just as good. And so,
Yes.
you know, I hope I was excited to kind of follow this story in India because my love for international politics was related to religion somehow, and I got to talk about it. So
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
excited about that.
Yeah. And even like even on a micro scale, change is happening that I think is really important and is so beautiful to watch. So, for example, last year I had somebody on my podcast who was a personal acquaintance of mine, and I was surprised at how religious she'd gotten. One of those, like, you and I experience people similar to this on these call-in shows sometimes, where you're like, you're reading a script. What does this mean? And then they rattle off something else. And you're like, okay, but you're reading a script. What does that mean? And they just, there's no love or joy or happiness. They're just aggressively regurgitating the cult-like shit they've been
Yeah,
told
yeah.
defends God. And very recently on social media, she's been posting like Taylor Swift
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
other stuff where I'm like, is somebody deconstructing?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
interesting. You go from like militantly talking about how like secular music is poisoning children's minds and the devil is a sickness, and to the point where I was like a little bit concerned about her mental health during that conversation because it just seemed like it was coming from like such an angry place, to like, oh, okay, so we're listening to secular music. Okay, like I can get
hmm
behind that.
hmm hmm
Or when somebody says like I'm a Christian and then they go, but I'm not like a Christian. And you're like, okay, so we're recognizing that just because somebody follows the Bible doesn't mean you believe anything. That doesn't mean you're one of them. Even that, it gives me so much hope. And there's
yeah,
like this whole school of people now that don't even call themselves Christians. They just
yes,
call themselves like Christ followers or something because they're like, I don't take with me anything that Christianity teaches except the literal like red text words of Jesus. That's what
yeah,
I'm going to stick with. And you're like, yes, let's do it. Like, let's deconstruct as slowly or as quickly as we feel like, as publicly or as privately as we feel like. To me, that gives me just as much hope as the large scale changes that we see all across the world. And I think it's awesome.
That is really fascinating. I want to make 2 points, and I know we're running short on time, so
No,
I'll make these
we're good.
quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will take that. If somebody says, "Well, I was religious, but I'm just more spiritual," fine.
Good.
I don't even know what that means, but you at least are moving away
Yes.
from these dogmas that have proven
Yes.
themselves to be so harsh, and really not productive, right? I'm not going to say that no good things come from religion, but really, when you think about it, grand scale, uh, it's not accomplishing a whole lot, and it often
Right.
leads to great atrocity. So if you can move away from that, even if you don't need to say, "Hey, I'm an atheist," but I will take that growth, that even if it's minuscule. And
Yeah.
then the other point is, this is the result of centuries of growth, if that's what you want to call it, because we had, at least from where you and I come from Western culture, we have the Catholic Church running things for a long time. They lose their ability to kill people. They lose their ability to wreak havoc, right? They kind of get challenged with this rise of new nationalism where countries are now becoming more legitimized, and the church doesn't really have the sway over them. Well, that allows for the Reformation and the Enlightenment, right? And now we've got the rise of Protestantism. But hold on, doesn't stop there. Then that Protestantism fractures a lot, right? And so now we've got all these sects, and now it's just kind of rippling. It's more chaos, right? It's splattering, and people are just going in any which way, and they're going further away from the roots of their tradition, which I think is good. This is a timeline that I think the end goal or the end destination might be atheism in some long version of this timeline. But
Yes.
we're not getting any closer to the things that made everything so harsh for such a long time. And I hope
Yes.
that people see that we have to keep our politics and our religion separate, and we have to just kind of be individuals and be caring, because we run the risk of bringing that back to life if we don't. So
Right.
I see a lot of positive things happening that is being kind of spawned or being catalyzed, if you will, by humanist free thought movements where free thought is encouraged, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's a beautiful
Absolutely.
thing. It's a beautiful thing.
It is. If you had, like, say somebody's watching this or listening to this and they're thinking, I like this resonates with me. I feel like I'm separating myself from the religion or the church or the belief system I was raised in. I'm starting to recognize that I don't believe these things, but I don't know where to go from here. What
Yeah.
advice would you give to somebody who they know they don't believe it, but they don't know what to do with that information?
Yeah. So my advice would be keep tuning in to shows like this and listen. Okay. Just listen. Listen as much as you can. Listen to many of them. Many people's different experiences, many people's different perspectives, people who have gone through what you're going through, and know that we are out here and we are talking, and we're talking for you. Okay. You don't have to do anything right now or
Right.
tomorrow or next week. I want you to take your time. I want you to really think about how you can make things work for yourself and work towards that in a speed that is comfortable for you, so that you can plan, you can prepare, and you can put yourself in a position that's going to be beneficial for you. I don't want you to do anything drastic that is going to, mess you up in any kind of way. So I
Yeah.
think I would start there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Excellent
And call
advice.
me on Talk Heathen.
Yeah, call us on Talk Heathen. Well, Jimmy, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I've really
Yeah,
enjoyed getting to like dive in a little bit deeper and like chat with you more about your personal story. For anybody watching this or for anybody listening on the audio platforms in the future, you can find my contact details in the description. You can also find links to my episode with Jimmy from Talk Heathen and also the nonprofits. But if you have any questions for Jimmy, or if you have any comments, or if you have any feedback whatsoever, please reach out to me. Let me know. And I would love to tell Jimmy your thoughts. I would love to ask him your questions. Maybe if there's enough questions, we can even bring you back on for like a Q&A from
yes.
people. But totally agree. I'm entirely biased, but I definitely think you should keep watching shows like this. You should subscribe to Talk Heathen, call in, ask your questions, air your grievances, give us a look of you, a subscription of the nonprofits and other shows. Truth Wanted is another great one. There's so many really phenomenal shows on YouTube. And that's all I got. So
Yeah,
thanks for joining us.
can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
If my parents happen to be watching this and they've made it this far, I want you to know that I love you deeply with all my heart. I think you have given me such a good life. You are the best parents that I could have asked for. And I just want you to know that none of my experiences or my thoughts or opinions are a reflection of you in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And I think they should be proud of the fact that you're a free thinker and somebody who researches and does their homework before hanging their hat, on something. So I
Sure.
think
Yeah.
that's a great trait too.
Sydney, thank you
Jimmy's parents.
so much. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Yes. Thank you to everybody for watching. Thank you to Pragmatic Crystal for being the
Yep.
best mod in the
Woo!
community. And we out. Bye, everybody.